San Francisco is now allowing immigrants to vote in school board elections this year, 2018. Non-citizen voting essentially means that any resident would be able to vote in those local elections regardless of citizenship status. And that would be true for those that are lawfully present, legal permanent residents, as well as the undocumented. For most Americans, it sounds odd that you don't have to be a citizen to vote. Something that seems quite odd actually has a very long history in the United States. 40 of the 50 states allowed immigrants to vote not just in local elections, but historically immigrants could vote also in state and even federal elections from 1776 until 1926. However, as the nation became more solidified and expanded, immigrant voting was politically contested in different places and opposed and promoted for different reasons. The U.S. government helped to encourage people to settle the West by providing voting rights as an incentive. But at different periods of time, during conflict, whether it was internal conflict like the Civil War or foreign conflict like the War of 1812, where the British sacked and burnt the White House, questions around immigrant voting led to the repeal or rolling back of immigrant voting. So there's several arguments that opponents raise to immigrant voting. The first and foremost is that the nation is comprised of members who should be the legitimate holders of this important right and responsibility to vote, and that is citizens. And there's a number of other arguments, including that you'd blur the distinction between citizens and non-citizens. You would reduce incentives for non-citizens to become U.S. citizens. You would potentially undermine the rule of law, and that it poses administrative challenges to elections, so it would compromise election integrity. The advocates of immigrant voting argue immigrants are contributors in every sort of conceivable way in the U.S., economically, culturally, socially, and therefore they should have a say over how their tax dollars are spent, over the education policies for their kids. If you think about other excluded groups in the United States, certainly those were some of the issues that women raised in the suffragette movement in the 19th century and early 20th century, African Americans during the Civil Rights era, or young people when the voting age was reduced from 21 to 18 in 1971, argued similarly. If there's policies being made about them, they should have some input in what those policies are. You know, the power of the vote is a means by which they can exercise their input. The real debate around immigrants calls into question sort of how do we see ourselves as a nation? Who's America? What's America? Should we be a society that's more open? Do we conceive of ourselves in national identity terms as a multiracial society, as an inclusive society, or a sort of more, Eurocentric, white Christian, society? That debate's been one that we've seen throughout the United States history, and I think we see it in very big sort of ways today. And I would just encourage people to sort of think through what their own conceptions are and, sort of engage in this debate. And immigrant voting is sort of a nice entree into such debates.